Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Safe Kids Now show. And I'm Stephanie Mann. And I am so excited to welcome a lady that's a real doer and helping other people. And her name is Julianne Coburn. And she is a two-time published author, an advocate, and she invented the Mummy Go bag. And she's a mother of three. So Julianne is supported, and she elevates women who are often been abused or otherwise teaching them to get back out there and how to heal and build a better life. Julianne is also the co-owner of NOLA Prestige Electric, a woman minority disabled veterans-based connecting company. So Julianne has also been appointed to the board of directors of Survivors Child Sexual Abuse, and she's the chairman of the board for that organization. And she's done so much. We're going to talk about a bill that they passed. It was called Bill 492, which you may remember if you're a child victim of abuse, that there was a time limitation, statutes of limitations. Well, they got that passed in her state of, I think, well, she's from Texas. So I want to bring in Julianne Coburn. Thank you for joining me, Julianne. Here she comes. Okay, let's see, can you see her? There she is. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to have you join us for the very simple reason that you are doing what needs to be done, because we have so many young people that we need to educate about child abuse. We have so many parents that need to have more information about what they can do. And tell us a little bit about your story, because I know you yourself you were a victim. So how did that?
Yes,
what
ma'am.
happened?
At the age of 17, I was raped. I did skip kindergarten. And so my birthday falls late. I'm a December baby, and I fell into the younger crowd. And so I graduated high school at the age of 17. My father had got me an apartment. I moved in with a girl that I had knew, and I found myself in a very, very rough place, very vulnerable. We had older guys living next door to us, 25, 26 years of age. We thought it'd be cool to hang out with them. Next thing you know it, I was drugged. I awoke to my perpetrator on top of me, raping me. I immediately screamed.
So sorry.
That's okay, thank you. I screamed, and I went back to the apartment. I reached out to a fellow friend of mine. She came over. She urged me to go to UMC, which is the charity hospital, to get a rape kit test done. We did do that. I did get afraid, though. being 17, when the nurse was like, well, you need to tell me who this was, because he was a pharmacist. And so I did share that. And she's like, you need to prevent this. I freaked out because I didn't want my parents knowing.
Yeah.
So I immediately left, literally.
Yeah.
And I went on my way, and, harboring that pain for so long and never really addressing it, I believe kind of set a platform for myself to allow this type of self abuse and not having self worth for myself to show up.
Right.
And until I actually spoke in front of representatives in the Senate in Louisiana, not Texas, I shared my story, and I had to. I was speaking on behalf of 4 different individuals that did not have the means to speak out or had the means to get there. And Representative Hughes, who was taking the bill forward, asked me to share my story. And so
Good.
for the first time, I actually shared my story to public about what had happened to me. And I'm having memories of his name doing that. I'm doing EMDR recently, been doing it for 5 years now. And I would love to report this person now that I'm older and I'm courageous enough to speak out, because I was just a little girl, in my opinion, 17, just getting out of high
And
school,
naive. Most of
naive
our
to just
young, yeah,
perpetrators, and just being manipulated to think that it's okay for what had happened. Because I did
yeah.
confront him, and he's like, well, what can I buy you so that you don't contact the authorities? And I fell into that just trap of just being victimized once more, being silenced for my own abuse.
Yeah, these perpetrators can figure out how to get to people or young girls that they have raped or whatever, and manipulate them so that they don't speak up, which is horrendous. So you have not reported him as yet? Is that what you're
No, I
saying?
have not reported him as yet. I definitely want to get his name. So I've been doing some research of
Okay.
who I lived with at the time and finding out. Like, I remember actually I'm not going to say his name, but his room, the guy that was living next door to us in the apartment, I do know his name. So I had Facebook requested him, and I haven't got anything back, because I definitely do want to get the correct name, if that makes
Right.
sense. Because of course I never would not want to report someone that's not true. But he did work at CVS, and I remember vividly, because they had given me the Plan B, because I was raped, and right after that, I did get pregnant with my daughter Gabriella, and I remember going into the CVS, and he was working behind the counter, and I had gotten a pregnancy test to see if I was pregnant. He was like, "Well, it's not for me, is it?" And I'm just like thinking, like, memories that you have that come
Yeah.
back that you've repressed due to trauma, they start to come up, and it's like, why didn't I'm such a courageous person. If anyone who knows me, I report things, I say no, I speak out, I utilize my voice, and to be silenced is just saddening to myself and to my 17-year-old self at that time. And forgiving that 17-year-old, knowing that she didn't have the tools that I do currently have now. But I wish that I would have been more courageous, because who knows what could have happened after me, right? Because everyone knows that a perpetrator, there's always victims that follow.
That's exactly right. You mentioned the name Gabby, and that reminds me of the current story in the news,
Yeah.
which is about Gabby, and her perpetrator, who was her fiance, her boyfriend. Not only who knows what went on with them, but it became an abusive relationship. And what do you think about this story? How does this touch your heart?
It breaks my heart tremendously, because I have been in probably 7 different domestic violence relationships.
Mm,
And I've been there where you blame yourself. You
yeah.
think that you have no one to talk to you. You're scared to call the authorities. And there's different factors that fall into place, right?
Yes.
You don't want the worst time that, and I work with women in domestic violence relationships, My Ugly Truth, Life Beyond Abuse. I created that book to provide a roadmap for women like myself who needed a friend to walk with them how to get out safely. Because the
Yeah.
worst time anyone can actually be in is leaving. And
Yes.
like I shared earlier, I just really feel that we need to be more conscious as a community of trauma-based techniques and modalities to use with law enforcement, to use with nurses, to use with judges, so there's not the stigmata of, oh, she deserved that.
Yeah.
It's her fault. Why are we blaming a poor victim that is dead, who can't speak on behalf of herself, who wasn't able to speak at the time when this was occurring? And when someone did see something, she blamed herself. So, again, educating so many people in the community to make them aware, bringing in those advocates when you do
Right.
go to these domestic violence calls that the police may get, or maybe going into the hospital, and providing that safety. Because if you don't feel safe, you're not going to leave. You're not.
Oh,
You're going to be stuck, and you're going to complete the same cycle of domestic abuse where it's forgiveness, someone's buying you something, and then the abuse happens again. And then they're sorry, and they're, oh, I'm not going to let it happen again. And then it happens again. And that's what happens. So it's just a terrible cycle that as a victim, it's very hard to just, think about treading water. You're treading water constantly. You're
yeah.
eventually going to drown. What can happen is you can die. You can, something terrible might happen to you to where you're handicapped, or, I mean, there's just so many variety of things that can happen to a victim. And if they don't have the resources, then they're stuck in a rut.
Well, that's why it's so important to educate people, because these guys know how to manipulate. And it's not like it doesn't happen to boys too, but
Absolutely.
the greatest number are young women. The greatest number of victims are young women. I think it's what, 1 in 3 women is,
I believe so. And then it's 1 in 6 for boys, I
yeah.
believe.
So it happens to boys too. So anyway, tell us a little bit about this law that you helped push through, because I think that sounds amazing. I do know about the law of statute of limitations, which was how many years? It wasn't, what, 5
It
years,
was
10 years? What was
18 year. Okay, so
18?
age of majority plus, I believe at the time it was 10 years on top of that. So you had until, I believe it was the age of 28. We actually went in. I was approached by a committee, Kevin Bourgeois, who was the president of SNAP. He's no longer, he's actually working for the Archdiocese of New Orleans. He phoned me up and was like, hey, we are collaborating with Catherine Robb with Child USA. We have a new representative. He's a rookie. We would love for you to provide some insight on how we can retract this bill and definitely, make change. So, long story short, we began meeting, I think it was in November, and other organizations started to tag along. And it was just literally like the faucet had turned on, and victims were coming out of nowhere to share their stories.
Good.
And we went in, we spoke in front of the representatives. There was a roadblock because the representative had made a deal with insurance lobbyists stating that they would not let a look back window for survivors. And so he gave his word. And as a politicians give their words, and they didn't want to,
Yeah.
definitely take that back. And so we really thought the bill was dead. It's a Catholic state. Our governor's Catholic, our attorney general's Catholic. There's now the bankruptcy court for the archdiocese of all those victims who are suffering from their perpetrators of the priest. And we really didn't think that it was going to move, but sure enough, it got pushed in front of Jude, where I spoke. I told my story, and I told 4 other women's stories. One's a human trafficking case, and the other 3 were childhood victims. And you literally could hear pin drops from these survivors speaking out, mothers, past survivors that wouldn't even have a day in court. They just wanted to be heard, right? And unanimously, the senator said, hang on, there should not be any type of age limit. It should be
Right.
infinite. And so we were like, what? And we're like, it's definitely going to die now. And sure enough, by the grace of God, it passed. And it was the most triumph
That's
feeling I've ever had, being a survivor and being a thriver that I am now. Looking back to 17-year-old self, I would have never thought that I would be in front changing laws and providing the availability for the kids of the future and the kids of today to be able to know that they can have their day to speak out for what had happened to them.
You know, that's amazing because people don't realize how powerful they can be. But it does take work and it does take persistence. And you obviously stayed on it, and so did the people that you were working with. So, you know, I, I give you lots of credit for that because it's not easy.
Mhm.
Anytime you're trying to pass a law, there's all kinds of roadblocks in your way. So, congratulations on getting
Thank you.
that passed. You know, we invite our listeners to ask questions. And I do have a question here for you from Cecily. And she says, how do you like the activism around the Me Too movement? Well,
I think it's kind of died out, to be quite honest.
yeah.
I think it's really sad. I was reading an article about who is the woman that's in New York with the guy that died that had the island. I cannot think of his name.
Oh, yes,
Oh gosh, I'm having a roadblock. Well, with him, she's in prison right now, and
yes.
they're
Does,
paying.
does it begins with a G, gazelle or
I can't think of it. I'm gonna have to
yeah.
Google it. I actually am gonna Google it because my daughter is big into the whole Me Too movement. But gosh, they had a documentary that I was watching the other day on it. Well, anywho, I think that it's a shame that these plaintiffs, these defendants' attorneys are paying the survivors off so that their stories can't be used against her. So she has a lesser sentence because,
Mm,
in my opinion, I believe that she is just as fault as the
yes.
perpetrator because she was grooming young women to come in so that they could basically traffic these young girls out to politicians and high level of authority people for their own gain.
And they
So,
did that for years. It wasn't just
absolutely,
one or two times.
no, this went
That
on
was a
for like,
business, a
it's
very
disgusting.
profitable business.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. So anyway, I wanted to move on and ask you also, what type of work are you doing for survivors at this point right now in your advocacy work?
I joined and I was asked to be on Survivors Against Childhood Sexual Abuse. Richard Windman is a survivor. He actually worked for SNAP. He was one of the youngest victims to come out for the Boy Scouts of America. And he created this organization so that it's a platform for all survivors, not just victims of possibly constitutional organizations or maybe, in sexual abuse. It's all. And so we have a men's group on Saturday that happens, and then a women's group on Sunday. The women's group we have several different women on the board that provide free individual modalities to work
Good.
with them with the traumas because we're not trying to create a space of trauma bonding because when you're trauma bonding, you're not actually doing the work to get out of the whole survival mode, right? So
Right.
we give tools and techniques for them. And if we feel that there is some type of mental instability, we refer them out to a therapist or a psychologist. And yes, I do understand that most people don't have means of insurance, but there is ways to get disability. There's ways to get on that so that you can have free health care, so that you can seek the mental health that you do need.
Well, you know, that's wonderful because are you finding a lot of people in this same boat? Um,
Yes. I never
uh,
knew that there was so many. Another one of my jobs, I was brought on to my cousin. He's a mass tort attorney in Houston, Texas. And he called me up one day and was like, "Hey, I need some help with the case." And I'm like, "I don't know anything about pharmaceutical drugs." And he's like, "No, the Boy Scouts." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're working with
yeah.
that population? That's a very delicate population." And starting in last October, I probably have spoke with over 500 different victims who had been victimized through the Boy Scouts as young boys. And
Mm,
that population, I just feel that they're not going to speak out about it. I had clients that
mm,
range between 85 years of age to 23 years of age, and they were embarrassed to share their story. So I've
of
heard it
course.
all. And I believe that we shouldn't shame people because they're already
No,
feeling shameful and feeling embarrassed about coming out about that, right?
absolutely. And you know that similar story as with the priests that violated children. But we're going to take about a 30-second break, and we will be right back with more information from Julianne Coburn in 1 minute.
The Pillow Throw and Tuck. It's handmade by myself, and you only can get it here, and it's patent, and it's only here at Rococo Design. It's like a regular pillow, or you can take the blanket out like so, fluff up the pillow, open up your blanket, wrap it around yourself, and then you can lay on your sofa and relax with your Pillow Throw and Tuck. When you're done with it, just flip it over. When you don't want the blanket anymore, you just fold it over twice. Fold it over twice again. Fold it over. And tuck it in the back. And there you go. You're back to the Pillow Throw and Tuck. Rococo Design.
You're listening to All About Us Radio. We're live streaming 24/7, playing old school versus new school. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at AAU Media, and visit our website www.aaumedia.com. Call us at 1-833-369-1444, extension 1, and leave us an inspirational message or request. You're listening to All About Us Radio.
Well, we're back, and welcome to the Safe Kids Now show. And we're talking today to Julianne Coburn, and she is a two-time author. She's also an advocate and an inventor of Mummy Go Bag. Okay, since we're talking about kids and so forth, I want to know, what is the Mummy Go Bag?
So I created the Mommy Go Bag 4 years ago. My husband, he's a 30-year war veteran, and we were on our last deployment. We were heading to Washington, D.C. to get his orders from the president at the time. And our baby, who's now 8 years old, little Lonnie, had motion sickness. So any time we were in the car, the child just constantly would throw up. And
Dear.
being a mom where I have a child that's literally, the age gaps are very wide, 21, 16, and 8. So they're very, different. I'm that mom. I'm always on the go, and I'm so ADD, ADHD that I'll forget things. So in case of an emergency, when little Lonnie, you would think after the 10th time of throwing up in my vehicle, I would have, something created. And I had an aha moment in the airplane, reeking of vomit, to come up with this Mommy Go Bag. The bags actually came in yesterday. It's been a work in progress. We've been working with manufacturers. We got 2,000 of them in, and it's a bag. The bag can have your laptop. It can fit anything, wet wipes, secret packets, anything and everything you could think of. But the cool thing about it is there's a kit inside it. It has a barf bag. It has Pepto-Bismol chewables. It has a strip to see if the child has a thermometer. It has a sealable patch to throw your vomit and store that package away. It has anything and everything you can think of when a child vomits. So that's the bag that I've created. So I'm really excited about that. That was something that I've worked super hard on manifesting, and it's here.
Well, good for you. I had one of those kids too. They get in the car and all of a sudden they're not feeling good, and they say, I don't feel good. And then all
and you're
of a
not
sudden,
prepared, and then vomits everywhere.
yes, and that's not good. So congratulations on your new invention. So good. You've got it patented and everything?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Well, now, what does your life plan look like in the next 5 years? What are you looking at here?
This year, I plan on approaching a representative in Texas to open up the statute of limitation. So I'm trying to work at least one SOL state that has been barred, and they're making you, choose 28, 18, 21, whatever that date is. I would love to see the new wave and the movement of all of these states being open, and to
Yes.
provide that ability that survivors can speak out in every single state, because it's going to be very hard for me to tell these Boy Scouts of America that, sorry, this case that you have with bankruptcy looks like it's not going to be able to go any further because your state has barred the statute of limitations. So I'm very dedicated into the work of meeting with politicians that are willing to hear survivors. Numbers are everything. It's not going to take one person. It's going to take a village and other organizations. And there's so many different organizations out there that can provide that easeway, and advocates out there to provide help with those people sitting in higher positions to get this available and open for each individual state.
You know, I have had the most interesting network of young men and young women, and some not so young, that have been working with child sex trafficking, child abuse, all of the problems that you're talking about. And I would love to put you together with
That'd be
some of
awesome.
the other groups and some of the movers and shakers in those groups, because they're doing amazing things too. And because I think this is such an important topic, and you're in a wonderful position as the you've been appointed to be the chairman of the board of the child sex abuse
Sexual SPSA, yes. I'm actually not the
survivors.
chairman. I'm on the board. Mason Basebach is the chairman. So it's okay. It's happened every single time when he created it, Richard Windman. And so Mason's like, you can have my position if you want it, Jillian. I'm like, oh, no, I'm good. I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm going to stay in my lane. But being part of the women's group, it's super neat, and I'm able to just meet so many different walks of life and be able to just cheer them on and provide that safe place that they do need, that they've never been able to have.
Well, what I will do is look up some of the past speakers that we've had that have been on this topic.
Awesome.
And I will send you, well, first I'll get in touch with them to make sure, you
It's
know,
okay. Yes.
we can reach out to you. And I know they will. They're all very open women, and they really want to see this limitation in their states because they come from all over the country.
Yeah, they
And
do.
I would say that this is one of the critical issues that need to be addressed because, you know, so many women are not coming forward, or they are reluctant to come forward. Their parents have never heard about this. They've never. I had a friend that I walked with for 6 years, and before I moved, and we 3 times a week. And one of the last meetings we had was she told me of her sexual abuse. And I said, "We've been walking for years and talking. How come you've never told me?" And she said, "Well, I was so uncomfortable with the topic." And she said, "I didn't think anybody cared." And I said, but she wasn't alone. There are so many women that have been victims that haven't spoken up. So more power to you on the work that you're doing. And we'll see if we can't help extend this beyond Texas. So Texas is already voted and passed that law, or it's in the
No, it
process?
definitely isn't. Anna Johnson was a representative that walked the bill and presented the bill last year, and it didn't get where it needed to go. And so Richard and I are working with I went through all of the representatives in Texas to kind of get a fill base of who is the mover and shakers in those areas. And so we kind of spotlighted a couple of them, and we're going to be having meetings to move forward for next session, because I think that this is something that needs to be in the forefront of
Absolutely. Good.
getting these victims the availability to seek justice, because it's not okay. It's not.
No, it's definitely not okay. And some of these perpetrators have hundreds of victims.
Yes, they do.
And most people have no idea that, these are. Well, let me just ask you a question here on my own. I think Hollywood has a lot to do with the sexualization of American kids.
I agree
And
with you. It's fluent.
yes,
Media, this right here.
yep,
Your child can now, I work with human trafficking cases also, and there is actually two suits, mass tort suits, that are about to arise. One of them is actually dealing with Facebook just came out with that if anyone had been involved with sex trafficking via social media, because I've seen cases where kids have been victimized in the school, right?
Yes.
And it was through Twitter. And so Twitter is like, I don't know what to tell you. You can't sue us. Like, go ahead, try it. But now Facebook is becoming more conscious about this in particular subject and bringing more awareness. And I do believe, and I agree with that statement, that it is sexualized in the movies. It's made okay. And so a parent that is morally teaching your children to have respect for yourselves, I'm able to gear them what they're watching and what they're doing. But those kids that are left alone at home at their own,
Yeah.
that's where things bad happen, and they have no one to steer them in the right direction. And again, if you have the television or movies where they're accepting it,
They've
when are they
normalized
gonna
it.
accept it?
They've
It's
made it
normalized.
so,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
I was
Cancel,
watching,
culture
I was
cancel. Let's
watching,
just cancel it.
you know, Big Bang Theory, and
Gosh.
my goodness, they made it sound like everybody does this. And,
Yeah.
you know, what bothers me the most is that a sexual relationship is a spiritual bonding with somebody else. And we never talk about that. We don't even talk about the spiritual aspect of it. And you know, as a Catholic, that this is not right, and it is not, should never be casual sex. There should always be an emotion, because it's an emotional involvement. And parents have to wake up and turn off the TV, write letters to Hollywood, write letters to their news media, and say, enough is enough. You've sexualized my children long enough, and we're going to put a stop to it. What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't have said it better. I'm very proactive in all of my children's lives, especially the girl. And I would, I'll give you a quick story on that. I had actually a coach. I would do checks, like phone checks, and I would go through
Right.
social medias just to see what you're doing, because you can't let these high schoolers think that they're in control of their lives, because they're little kids, honestly.
Yes,
who
they are.
want to be adults, little small children. And I noticed that a coach was Facebook messaging my daughter, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? And so I immediately went down to the high school, and I'm like, what is going on? Who is this coach? And he's like, well, actually, he's another coach at another school. And I'm like, I was a teacher at one point in my life, and I'm like, I know you sign a policy that says that you cannot contact XYZ outside of school, like you're crossing boundaries. And the coach, that principal was like, well, we'll get to it. And like, it went all the way up to the superintendent, and the superintendent had him withdraw. And then her father had filed suit against the guy, but being that I had stopped it, because it was getting to the point where he's like, can I have her Snapchat? And Snapchat things erased, so you don't ever see that. And we had Red Laurel's, which is in Lafayette, Louisiana. It's a huge gym that everyone goes to in the town. And he was like following her, and it was just super weird. And if I wasn't so proactive in checking those phones, making her aware that, hey, it's not okay. This is your body. You should respect it. Have some self-respect. Come to me if it doesn't feel right, because a lot of times we're not teaching those kids those life skills of, if that feeling is not an okay feeling, it's probably 9 out of 10 is not okay, right? No. Go with your gut. And I think we need to teach our children to understand that, hey, even if this is going on, to have a safe person to go to. And I agree. I think that we need to just be very proactive in our children's lives, in our communities, to educate those that things need to be monitored. We can't, these are little human beings that are just watching what we are doing. So if it's okay, then they're going to just do it, right? So what happened to the Leave It to Beaver type of television that was on? Where did things get misconstrued that our spirits and our dignity is no longer important to share with the holy matrimony, right?
Right.
Where did that stop? So again, I question it. I definitely instill it in my home. I'm a Christian, and I just believe that my mom would always say, "You're engaging, and when you're having sexual intercourse, your spirits are then uniting." It says that whenever you are getting
Yes.
married. So we have to be very mindful about what we are doing, because if we connect with those wrong people, I've been there. I'm a testimony of it. It's going to just create habit. It's going to create negativity, and it's going to create you in a pitfall of mistakes of trying to pick yourself up of this grave that you just created. So that's what I have to say about that.
Well, I have another question here for you, and this is a good one. How can we turn back the hypersexualization of children?
Take those phones away from your kids,
That's what
go
Christopher
outside
Duff
and
said.
ride a bike and, enjoy nature. There's so many things to do. But it's interesting. There's another job I had as a teacher. I taught in Louisiana at a school where Bobby Jindal was the governor at the time. And we had children that ranged between 7 to 17 years of age, and they were a warden of the state. So I worked with judges, I worked with probation officers, and I was their teacher. And there's 3 types of kids per se, right, that go on to inflict others, that were, they're predators themselves. They inflicted sexual abuse onto someone, and that's why they were in this program that he had created. There's 3 types. There's that one kid that's just born very hypersexual, right? They're very aware of what's going down, our nervous system, of what's happening, such as your bottom area. And then you have children who see maybe pornography, that are introduced to it, television, hypersexualization, like we just talked about, movies. They'll have more tendency to do that. And then, of course, you have those children that have actually been abused, thinking that it's okay to do unto others, such as cousins and in the home, because we talked about that earlier. A lot of your foster care system that's where abuse does happen. Right. A lot of broken homes, that's where it does happen, where the moms or the dads are having to work 2 to 3 jobs to provide for their kids. So there's no level of authority to say, hey, that's not okay, right? So again, teaching your kids that the phone and technology is not everything. There's so many great things to go do. Learn how to go hunting, learn how to go fishing, go ride a horse, go do something that is readily available to you. Get your kids in sports. I'm a big fan of making sure that my kids are involved, because downtime consists of bad time, in my opinion. Even if they're not involved in sports, maybe they're interested in technology, of learning how to program something or create something. Be innovators. We all can create stuff. Don't just allow an iPad or an iPhone or the television to babysit your kids. I monitor definitely time on my phone. You're going to put it up. It's not going to happen. I didn't have that growing up. So,
Yeah. Well, I have a friend, and her daughter is 9 years old, and she won't even let her watch any television. She can watch some of the movies that they approve of. That's it. And
YouTube, there's actually, if you're allowing your kid to watch YouTube, your kid can click on something and then it brings up something and you're like, what? So it's
very devious.
Scary world out there. Let me just say that.
And parents have to be on the alert. Unfortunately, it's a constant job. Well, anything else you'd like to add as we bring our program here to a close? Anything else?
I just appreciate you having me on. Thank you for making a community of awareness and of consciousness, because a lot of people are too afraid to speak about it, and be those movers and shakers out there, supporting those who have been victimized. There's so many levels of support out there that no one really knows about that.
Right.
It's literally a search of going to your local library or going and taking somebody's phone and searching help for shelters for women in domestic violence relationships, victims of abuse. There's so many organizations out there that are supporting victims. And so thank you for having me on, and thank you for allowing this to flourish so that we can be more conscious human beings.
Well, I'm so grateful that you're doing this and speaking out about it, about your own experience and about the experience that you're giving to other people. And honestly, You guys out there that are doing this hard work are so necessary to wake up Americans to what is actually happening in our television, in our iPhones, in our movies. And if we don't start speaking up and supporting our children more, this isn't going to just disappear. It's going to get
the battle
worse.
against spiritual warfare, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't disagree with that a bit. As a matter of fact, spiritual warfare is what we're experiencing all over the globe. So thank you so much. I appreciate your being with us, Julian. And best of luck. And I will contact you about some of our people that might be of help.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And I want to mention that next week we have another amazing woman, and this is a person that might also I connect with Julian, because her name is Adia, and Adia Lancaster has been working in this field, and she's on boards on sexual abuse, and we're trying to get the word out that parents, please, you've got to do a good job of educating your kids. And if you don't have that spiritual aspect of helping kids or know how to do that, that's why I wrote here, Empowerment Parenting. It's on Amazon. It's how to empower kids so when you're not around, they are going to learn how to take care of themselves and make good choices for themselves. So God bless you all, and we look forward to talking to you next week and to our guest, Adia Lancaster. So see you next week. Bye.
You're listening to All About Us Radio. We're live streaming 24/7, playing old school versus new school. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at AAU Media, and visit our website www.aaumedia.com. Call us at 1-833-369-1444, extension 1, and leave us an inspirational message or request. You're listening to All About Us Radio.